Mark is a senior applications DBA where Carol works. Mark is primarily responsible for the ongoing development and maintenance of the customer sales and inventory application suite. A good portion of his time is spent coding and scripting, but he also needs the autonomy to package up database changes between the dev, unit test, and the user acceptance test database instances prior to handing off these packages to the production DBAs for deployment. Like his colleague, Carol, the data analyst, Mark loves the convenience of having information available at his fingertips through Toad's object palette, which he frequently uses as a launching point to other parts of Toad. Mark especially likes the fact that it's very easy to filter out the contents of the display to show only the products he's interested in at the moment. Here, for example, Mark is filtering the object display by the product prefix because he has a special project to migrate these tables to several other databases. Like Carol, he finds himself frequently in the Data tab, but unlike Carol, he uses the other tabs much more frequently as he is called upon to make changes to foreign keys, check constraints, even trigger logic, and occasionally reverse engineer the script and make changes so that he can migrate to other database instances. Mark also has to make quite a few more changes to database objects, including tables. And he frequently needs to resort to the alter table object editors to make minor tweaks on the development and user acceptance test databases. You'll notice when Mark right-clicks to alter this particular table that many of these product tables are under version control. Toad for SQL Server can communicate with back-end version control providers such as Microsoft's Visual SourceSafe, CVS, and Subversion. That means Mark can be confident about making changes without stepping on others' changes or those changes stepping on his. And as he asks Toad to communicate to the Visual SourceSafe backend, which controls the check-in and the check-out for these objects, Toad for SQL Server brings up an object editor which allows him to change the properties, the constraints, and the foreign keys and the table structure of this particular table. When Mark is finished with his table changes, he's able to check in his changes one or more tables or objects at a time. In this particular case, Mark has provided a filter to prefix the tables by product because he has a special product to migrate these tables along with their data to several other databases. So Mark is able to shift-click to highlight multiple objects within the object palette, and he right-clicks to generate the DDL creation script for these objects straight to an editor window within Toad. Mark can't work on this script right now, but later on he will use this script and the group execute facility within Toad to make minor tweaks to the script and then distribute to several databases to recreate the objects for the product tables. Mark knows the data for most of his tables like the back of his hand, but like Carol, he likes to use the ER diagrammer as a good launching point to get into the query builder to create complex queries that go straight to the editor so he doesn't waste time troubleshooting poor syntax. Here we see Mark right-clicking and sending the products table to the ER diagrammer to verify and validate that relationships haven't changed surrounding the products table. What he really wants to do is create a query involving most of these tables, so he removes the tables he does not want to see, verifies the relationships amongst the existing tables, and then sends those tables to the query building facility, where with a few more clicks, he's able to create very quickly the query that he needs. Note with the convenient QBE matrix, or the query by example matrix, Mark can quickly introduce aliases for any of the columns, including calculated fields, and even to add subqueries to his main query. In this case, Mark sees the query he needs, and before opening it up in the editor, he wants to run it at least once to make sure that the result set that he needs to see is brought back. Once he's validated the query, he's confident to pass the query along to the editor where he can continue his development efforts. Toad's SQL and SQL Script Editor is also one of the top places that are frequented by users of Toad for SQL Server and comes complete with many facilities that enhance productivity when doing database-centric development. Mark estimates personally that he's experienced over 40% productivity gains since using Toad for SQL Server several years ago. Here, Mark shows us some of the reasons why he's fond of Toad's editor. Mark is pulling out his code snippets library, which introduces him to all the different functional snippets of code that he could introduce in his development efforts. This code snippets library is built into Toad for SQL Server and is extensible by the user, but comes pre-built with most or all of the functions developers use in their code, and avoids unnecessary time-consuming effort in looking up and troubleshooting poor syntax. Here, Mark forgets the parameters that are required for a date-diff functional call. And having confirmed the parameters and finding the date-diff function that he needs under the date and time functions, he can double-click or drag and drop to the editor and tab between the parameters to provide the parameter values. Here he wants a day's diff, and for the start date and the end date, he'll be using the cell start and the cell end dates, and copy those for the rest of the parameters for his functional call. Mark can then verify the syntax and correct if necessary. Note that Toad for SQL Server did mark the line at which the error occurred in his code, and after a few seconds Mark realizes that he's missing a comma to separate the columns. He reruns the query and validates the result set output. While Toad's code snippets library serves as a useful reference library for frequently used functional calls within code, Mark also likes the pre-built code template library, which is also extensible for Toad users. Here Mark demonstrates some of his favorite code templates that are associated with easy-to-use and easy-to-remember keywords, such as proc. A short key of control space will expand the keyword proc to an embedded procedural code block that allows Mark to accelerate his development efforts and avoid costly mistakes from typos or not remembering syntax. Mark also loves the SQL recall library that's built into Toad as he continues to develop with the SQL editor, and has even saved himself in the past a few hours of effort by finding SQL that he thought he no longer needed. While the SQL recall library can save a rolling history of the last few hundred SQL statements that are executed within the editor, Mark has found that naming his SQL, his favorite SQL, is a huge time saver, and he has started to develop a permanent library of named SQL. Naming the SQL is as simple as associating with a keyword and hitting the shortcut Control Space key to expand the named SQL. Mark is very, very fond of the pre-built formatting capabilities within Toad for SQL Server. And since he deals extensively with extended stored procedures and external third-party languages, Mark is especially fond of the ability within Toad to convert and strip SQL from third-party language constructs. Here, Mark asks Toad to convert the SQL statement to embedded C# code, which is copied to the clipboard and can be pasted wherever he needs. Occasionally, Mark finds himself resorting to his command line capabilities, but even here, Toad's editor comes to the rescue, allowing Mark to take advantage of IntelliSense-like properties, or even dragging and dropping from the object palette. Finally, although Mark has been working with SQL Server for a number of years, Mark has come to appreciate the built-in knowledge base within Toad for SQL Server. Here, Mark needs to do a quick check on the select syntax for the SQL that he's trying to embed in his .NET applications. The knowledge expert within Toad for SQL Server is a quick reference base of knowledge that contains foundational information and topics regarding the development, administration, and troubleshooting for SQL Server environments. Mark and his development team use the knowledge expert to answer up to 80% of the questions they have regarding administration or code management and testing and debugging, and have recently found that they can share information by extending the knowledge base with developers' comments and even attached scripts as a central repository for sharing that info. From facilities like the object palette to the query builder, to the editor, to basic foundational knowledge, Toad provides the integrated facilities to define, code, test, and package your development efforts to increase quality and increase your productivity.